Welcome, everybody. So I'm Angie Thompson, the facilitator. We are at the meeting 20 of our West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force. And today actually marks a moment because this is the 1-year anniversary of the CTF. So we've had 20 meetings in 12 months. So that is not an insignificant level of effort that you all have put in. So just wanted to take a moment and remind you all of the hard work that you've done and acknowledge it. And I haven't been with you through all of it, but appreciate all of your time and energy and passion, I think that you've brought to the group. So I'm going to do a quick, just kind of logistics piece here. We want to make sure that the CTF meetings, that everyone can participate in these. So we'd like you to use the chat feature on Zoom sparingly, so that if you have a comment or you want to make a comment, you could put a note in the chat, but then we're going to ask you to speak your questions so that everyone can hear it and can participate. So there's also a raise your hand feature, so feel free to use that on Zoom as well. We'd also like you to identify yourself when you speak or ask a question, which will help for people who just may not be able to track who's speaking at the time. Also describing what's on the screen. And if you have questions, we can read questions aloud if you don't want to speak them. I also want to let people know there's some people who are watching us live on our streaming service. And so if you are watching, I want to let you know that actually we don't see the questions that you might, if you make comments on the YouTube channel, we actually don't see those. So I just want people to know there's ways for you to send an email to the project team if you have questions, but wanted you to know that that's not a live connection that we have there. Paulina, do you want to run through, I guess, the agenda and what we're doing tonight?
Absolutely. I do not want to run over anyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, as Angie said, to our 20th meeting. I have had the pleasure to be with you all since the beginning, and I'm super grateful that we're still hanging in there. And as a collective, we are being present into those impacts for the West Seattle Bridge closure. So thank you for being here. Today we have some expected goals to go over the agenda, and I am also letting you know that Greg, my co-chair, won't be joining us today, so it's Angie and myself, but we are both very happy to be here with you. Foremost, like we are going today to be talking about doing some updates on the West Seattle Bridge, of course, but bringing us all of you up to date on the high-end bridge log construction activities. We want to make sure that we have that plan coming back, and we will be hearing from Greg Izzo from USDOT into doing some also exciting updates actually on the priority hired that it's going to be part of this new contract, and we look forward to hearing from him today, as well as the rehabilitation progress and bridge updates. We're also going to be hearing from Maureen and Matt from USDOT as well, and coming to understand on the implementation of the policy for the low bridge access. So we look forward to having Sarah with a new specific presentation today and gathering feedback from us all on the importance of what is looking like in the regional employer plans for the return to work, because we all know we are witnessing much more traffic than when we started to have this meeting, and it's only going to get worse. So what are we learning from all these studies, but also how are we as community, as people, making different choices how we are going around? I think it's very important that we talk about it too, like what are the choices that exist out there that we don't come back to the same before, and trying to use more public transportation, maybe more bikes, etc. So we're going to be talking about that, as well as we're going to be talking about the long-term bridge replacement and understanding the scope, the schedule of the study, as well as clarifying some of the what is coming next in July meeting. And as always, very important to hear from you, your voice, and your feedback. And speaking about that, about your voice and feedback, I always like to start our meetings hearing from you and see if you want to share something with us. What are you hearing in the community? What has been some of the feedback that you have received from the improvements from the home zones? And so I would like to get that going. If anybody, Angie, maybe you can help me identifying some raising hands there.
Yeah. Anyone wants to share? I don't see any hands raised. We'll give it a minute. You're thinking about it. Oh, Anne. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Anne Higuera. So I'd like to reprise my request from last meeting about having updates online, I guess, that are timely, maybe timed with these meetings that would tell people what's new. I discovered there's a really great page that SDOT has called the West Seattle High Rise Bridge Program page, which has a lot of really great information on it. But the last time it was updated was last month. So it says May, Heather. It does. And it may have been May 31st. So, well, that would have been, you know what I'm getting at. But having something regular and updated for everybody to look at would be awesome. And there's a really great explanation and pictures on there of all of the things that are wrong with the bridge, but there's still no really good explanation of why it happened. And I still want to know that. I feel like I know I've been in 20 meetings. I still don't know that answer. So seeing that written down somewhere would be great. That's it for me. Yeah. Thank you.
And it's only been 19 meetings so far because we haven't gone through. So fair enough.
And thank you so much for that feedback. I do remember you saying that, and I'm sorry, I understood that you meant to keep the updated discussions going. And I think that I was thinking of the blog that we have for all the things that we are updating on the meetings, but you actually mean to understand the history of why the bridge broke specifically.
Right, that was really my question. But the updates for the community, I think, I know that SDOT has the blog on this, but keeping that web page specifically on the high bridge and the low bridge, keeping those as like updated monthly with new info. If there is anything, then at least people know that they're seeing the latest thing if they go there.
Heather, would you like to answer? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, if that's okay. Hey, Anne, thanks. And I hear you. And I would be very surprised if it isn't updated as regularly as we update the blog. So, and I think that on that first page, you'll find the links to the latest blogs. So I suppose it depends on how you like to get your information. For me, I don't always remember to go to a website to check the next thing. So I've signed up for the updates to come to my email, and then every time there's a new blog or any kind of announcement, we always send out an email blast. But all of that content always gets updated. The other thing to know is this is a stage in the program where the updates aren't coming fast and furious like they had been at the beginning. The other thing I want to note, and I know this is community time, Paulina's starting to twitch, is that we, as part of our 60 and 90% design, we're going to be able to talk a little bit more. We're going to have more solid understanding so that we can answer that question for you. The reason that we haven't answered is we haven't sort of spoken specifically to that is it's not as simple as we want it to be. So we just have to make sure that we know everything so that we can communicate it simply.
Okay.
Sorry, Paulina.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I really wanted to hear from you. So I appreciate you getting back. But I have requested Bill if he can put the link of the blog on the chat for those of you who may not have it updated. Also, if you want to sign up for the latest of the latest, I do receive also that email. But then following on a recommendation to update on the history a little bit, that would be great if we can get back. Thank you, Juan. And I'm going to move on to Colleen. You have your hand up?
I do. Hi, it's nice to see Heather's kitty cat behind her, and all the kids coming through. So I think what I'm hearing a little bit, and I'm Colleen Desmond, I'm from Highland Park neighborhood, and I've been hearing from some of my neighbors that they're really pleased to see the work that's been done, some of the speed humps and other things that are happening in the neighborhood. So that's been good. There is still concern about the speeding in the school zones. And I know school's out next week, but because of the increased traffic, we're seeing a lot of just speed in those zones in the mornings and in the midday. And that's concerning. And I sent an email to USDOT, but the response was that this is an enforcement issue. So I wasn't sure what to do after that. But so those are the things that I've been hearing. But so far, people, are at least that I've talked to, have been pleased with the work that's being done. So thanks, USDOT.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And I exactly hear you, what you're saying. The same thing exactly is happening here in South Park. And I've heard as well in Georgetown, except like there's not a local school in Georgetown, but here in South Park, we do have a local school. And we have been finally gotten the flashing lights of the school and the school time. And hopefully you're getting those two up in the hill. And I'm glad to hear that you got some response, but whatever is necessary and needed, I would say, please contact Sarah. I am going to now call Jen Temple. She doesn't have her hand raised, but she has a message for us today and introduction as well. Jen?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. I am going to be transitioning off the task force, given some commitments that I have coming up. But I just wanted to say that I've been super grateful to be part of this, super grateful to all the work that's being done, and to be able to represent West Seattle Bridge now over the last almost year. And wanted to introduce Liz Powell, who's going to be joining in my place starting, she's already here, but attending, but the next meeting, she'll be the participant in my place. She's been part of this since the very beginning as well. So thanks.
Jen, I wanted to say thank you one more time. I have already expressed this over the email for your passionate commitment. I know that you were one of the great advocates for like repair and bringing all that information to us. So thank you for all your dedication this past year. I truly, truly appreciate it. It's been wonderful to get to meet you. Is Liz here to introduce herself? Oh, there she is. Liz, could you please?
Hi everyone. I am excited to be part of this organization. So thank you for welcoming me. And thank you, Jen, of course, for representing West Seattle Bridge now. So I look forward to the conversation over the next, hopefully not 20 meetings.
Liz, thank you. We welcome you. And I'm sure Jen told you that we're an awesome group to work with. But we want to make sure that you know that Greg and I are the co-chairs, always happy to be a resource for you. So welcome. And I'm going to transfer to Angie. Thank you so much to everyone who had some feedback and the first words for us to get us going. Angie.
Yeah, thanks, Paulina. Megan, can you put the slides back up? I think we're going to jump in to the content, and the first presenter that we have tonight is Greg. I guess it's this afternoon, is Greg. Greg Izzo, are you ready?
Yes, Angie, thank you.
Great. Okay, take it away.
Okay, I'm having some connection issues today, so please bear with me. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Izzo. I'm the program manager in charge of capital delivery for the West Seattle Bridge Safety Program, and great to see you all this month. I'll be here to provide some updates on the high bridge and low bridge. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have great news. As we expected to have this month, and as promised, we had selected a contractor, a GCCM contractor, who is on board now, and we are currently scoping through pre-construction services right now, scope of work, and we're negotiating with them, and that is Kramer North America. It was a great honor to have them selected amongst a heavy pool of competitive bidders. Kramer is obviously, I'm going to get to this in a minute, but they were part of our phase 1 stabilization contract, and they will now be assisting and partnering with us, true partnership in a phase 2, strengthening and rehabilitation of the high bridge. So we're really excited to have them on board. Again, we're working toward the NTP toward the end of this month, but it's just great to have the team together. And now we can really move forward in full speed in a collaborative way. The notice to proceed on pre-construction services, like I said, is still June 28th. It is our goal, as always, to press that and try to come in advance of that if we can. But right now, we are definitely going to meet that date. And we're, like I said, we're working through the pre-construction services contract right now, get that ready, lined up. And this way we could have our NTP at the end of June. And really get their input and start reviewing the 30% plans. So the next scope and schedule update will occur this summer, July 7th is around when we're going to have our 60% intermediate submittal. This is very important because we really want Kramer's input on this submittal. So they'll be reviewing our 30% plans, providing input and feedback on that 30% set so that we can incorporate that into the 60% and then associated updates to the schedule and costs, et cetera. So very important that they get integrated quickly so we can start incorporating their input in there and really getting constructive feedback from our contractor, which is the whole purpose of the GCCM delivery method. The NTP is still planned for later this year in November, so we are still on schedule for that. Again, we are always exploring opportunities to advance whatever we can when working in partnership with our state and federal agencies who are going to be involved with this project along the way as well. And again, on track to meet the aggressive schedule overall, and that includes the back end of the schedule for the project completion, particularly the high bridge in mid-June of next year. So everything's on schedule and on track. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, Kramer North America is a full-service heavy civil contractor. In fact, they've delivered roughly 27 GCCM contracts over the last 15 years, and 25 of those contracts have been rehabilitation of bridges or reconstruction of bridges. So we have a very experienced, qualified contractor, very collaborative. Really looking forward to working with them and proceeding on. They're headquartered out of Wisconsin. They have experience in the area. Obviously, they've coming off of our Northgate Ped Bridge project. They're on that right now, and that's wrapping up. As I mentioned earlier, phase 1 stabilization, they've supported us through that as well. They have some other projects in the area as well, but they're originally from Wisconsin and spreading out west, and very strong work. Other recent projects include a US 52 Savannah over the Mississippi River. So they're familiar with crossing larger waterways and some of that complex work that comes along with that. And is in addition to a historic rehabilitation as well for a bridge crossing in Minnesota that crosses the Mississippi as well. So there's a picture of those bridges right there. So again, very excited. We've worked with this contractor recently. We're very familiar with their work, their team. Very collaborative approach, and we're already off to a great start, even without the NTP on June 28th. But once we expect that, it's full bore ahead. Next slide, please. And as Paulina had mentioned earlier, one of the other exciting parts of this project will be implementing this program, the Community Workforce Program Priority Hire. This is a program that the Seattle Department of Transportation already implements on locally funded capital projects. However, it was never approved for federally funded capital projects. So this is an opportunity to submit our waiver, submit our application and our work plan this week so that we can get it in there. And this is in partnership with our Purchasing and Contracting Division, in addition to SDOT. So we're in a partnership on this to implement this quickly, get it in this month, and implement this program as part of this project. It's obviously has a lot of benefits, which I'll get to in a second. It's a 4-year pilot program. It'll begin in 2021 and end in, I think it's 2025. We're in a 30-day comment period right now. The pilot purpose here, provide opportunities to communities that have historically been excluded from participating on federally funded projects. Like I said earlier, we've only taken advantage half of this because of our locally funded projects implemented, but now we're looking to implement on all federal projects as well as a program. And the other purpose is to be responsive to requests from local, state governments that utilize local higher priority, higher programs, and have seen the increase in participation in the building trades from women and people of color. So this is really going to benefit our workforce in the local communities. We feel this is a great opportunity to take advantage of this and the benefits that come along with it for how much we've been through over the last year or two. So we're super excited about this. Yeah, it's looking great. And it's more and more promising as the federal government has approved the pilot program. And as I mentioned earlier, SDOT and FAS will work together to submit the application this week. It'll probably be going in. And yeah, and this will identify other federally funded projects within the SDOT portfolio, not just the West Seattle Bridge program, but we're looking broadly as a program within SDOT to implement more of the priority higher on other federally funded projects we deliver. So all great news. Next slide, please. Okay, and this again, just to remind everyone of the schedule. This has not changed, but as Heather had mentioned earlier, we're going to soon see some updates as we get our contractor on board and get collaborative and really get on the same page with what we can do with our schedule as far as perhaps bumping things up, trying to get some early packages out, things like that, all in partnership with our WSDOT and FHWA regional friends as well. But we have to really respect the process of first getting our partners on board, and then we'll eventually show some changes here coming toward the 60 and 90%. But right now, everything is still on schedule. Like I said, we have the selection and we're going to be starting work this November. That has not changed. And the back end of the schedule as well has not changed, with that mid-June date being the target date to complete the work and start getting traffic introduced back to the high bridge. We have peer reviews going on right now. We have independent cost estimates. There's a lot of exercise, a lot of activities happening right now during this 30% to 60% phase, and we'll continue some of that work as well for going from 60 to 90%. So everything is on schedule and looking great. So that's an update on the West Seattle High Bridge and Low Bridge. Next slide, please. I believe that might be it. Any questions?
Yeah. So let's pause for some questions for Greg. Deb, you put a comment in or a question in the chat. Maybe you want to share that question with Greg?
Sure. Just looking to find out, you said that it would proceed after a 30-day comment period. Do you need comments from us to accompany the application?
That's a really good question, Deb. I don't have an answer for that as far as the comment period, as far as facilitating that. We could certainly go back to our purchasing and contracting division to see how we could leverage input and that comment period to further push this program to make sure and ensure that it's passed and we move forward with it. But I would like to follow up with our purchasing and contracting folks to see, within the 30-day comment period, if it would help to have contribution from the community task force members and other members who may provide some more influence on in moving this program forward.
Yeah, I
Sure,
can
just-
jump in there just a second too, maybe, and say, what Greg's talking about with the 30-day comment period is about the restart of this federal pilot program nationwide, not about our specific application. So I think community support, expressing community support in the Federal Register for that program could definitely be helpful in USDOT making the decision to fully restart the program. And what Greg is talking about is that we're putting together the materials that we need to get the waiver for this project to be accepted into the pilot program. I don't think that really will need community support. It'll be more of like a technical waiver request that goes in there, if that helps clarify, Deb.
Fair enough. Just let us know whether it's the community or the task force or both, how we can put pen to paper. Thanks.
Great.
You're welcome, Deb. And that I thanks, Sam. You made a good point there. That can actually be an independent input from the actual bridge project, that process, so we can get more information on how anyone can just provide that input for that 30-day period. Thank you, Sam.
Great.
Thanks, Deb.
Before we get to you, Diane, I wanted to note there were a couple comments that folks put in the chat during Greg's presentation. One is about Lisa Herbold thanks for keeping us on schedule. And then Paulina made a note about being really grateful for the priority hire. So just so people know what that conversation was. Diane, did you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you. Can we go back to the slide that shows the calendar, the quarters, what's happening when? Okay, thanks. So am I understanding this correctly, to say that by July 1st, the High Bridge will be open?
By July 1st, you're looking at 2022.
Yeah.
That year.
2022.
Okay, so the work on the High Bridge is on schedule to be completed by mid-June 2022. So that could very well mean that, as we look at our commissioning plan right now that we're working on, Diane, we're working on a commissioning plan, which is basically a plan to reintroduce traffic to the bridge once the work is completed. And that commissioning plan includes some live load testing and certain procedures that need to happen before we introduce traffic. So yes, I guess my short response is yes, there is a possibility that as early as that date, that traffic will be back on the bridge. Again, our goal is to complete by mid-June 2022. So anytime after that, provided that the load testing and all the testing and procedures go as planned, absolutely, we will have traffic reintroduced back to the bridge.
So follow up to that, based on the contractor's experience with other bridge repairs, and I would imagine, not being a contractor, but imagine that they do the certain load testing and some of that all along the way.
Yeah.
They don't just do the repair and then say, oh, is it fixed? And then go, oops. Realistically, how much time from the end of the last repair to the date of opening is the contractor saying they need? What is that time frame?
We don't have that exact time frame yet. Let me just make it clear. We don't even have the contractor under contract yet. That is June 28th. So as soon as we get in towards the end of this summer, we're going to have those conversations. We just don't have that much information yet. Coming from our engineer of record, though, the designers, if everything goes as planned and as far as the design work is completed and we start testing that bridge structure and the response is according to the design's expectation, the engineer of record, that's a huge hurdle. And that's the part that we're looking at, really making sure that, if the engineer of record is comfortable and the tests go well according to plan, then that really drives how quickly we can introduce traffic to the bridge. It's not so much the contractor's choice of they're just completing the work as per plan, as the engineering plans say. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we do not have a date yet. I can't get that granular on exactly when the traffic will be introduced. But right now we're comfortable to say that mid-June is when the work on the bridge will be completed. And the live load testing could happen, some of it prior to that and some of it after. So we still have to work out those details. And that is part of the commissioning plan, to work on the back end of the schedule to get more specific on when we could expect the traffic to be reintroduced after the testing is completed.
And so the follow-up question to that is, so then based on what you just said, when would we likely know, and what are people experience with this thinking would be the latest date the bridge would be open?
Well, we would likely know when we get toward the end of the final design, we'll probably getting more clear picture of what the back end of the schedule is going to look like. And again, along with that comes the commissioning plan that we're still working on. Again, we're still in the front side of the schedule. So the back end of the schedule is the commissioning. We're starting to look at that, but until we have the contractor on board and has some input on that as far as the schedule to complete the work, we won't be able to really speak toward any specifics on when we're going to have traffic reintroduced. But we're comfortable again to say that the work right now, and as proposed by the RFQ by the bidder, the work will be completed by mid-June 2022.
Well, final point, and then but it's frustrating because when we were making the recommendation to whether repair or replace, I don't know if it was you or who, said we will be able to reopen the bridge mid-22. To me, that means July 1st, mid. And so people were prepared at that point to make a prediction on which the mayor and this committee and, so forth made decisions. So somebody was prepared to say that at this point. And now,
No,
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it sort of sounds like you're waffling
No,
on that.
Diane,
No.
Heather's been waiting to get in here to be a bit more clear. So, but that's not the case.
That is not the case.
So, yeah.
No, Diane, the reason that we said mid 2022 instead of offering a month or a week or a date is because we don't have enough information right now to give a specific date. As we get further into the design, 60% design is coming in just a couple of weeks. Then we will have more and more detail about when we'll be able to open. So what Greg is presenting here is the best information that we have. And I hope that over the course of this year that we've spent together, that you feel like we've been forthright enough with the information that we've shared, that you believe that as soon as we have more information, we will present it to you.
And I'll just say that nothing has changed from our schedule throughout any of this process. In fact, we're, as Greg said, we're hitting all of our milestones and doing it and being as aggressive as possible to reopen the bridge as quickly as possible and safely. So we will continue to do that. There's been no change to our schedule.
Right.
Thank you, Heather and Sam, and of course, Diane. Let's move on to, I would like to call Anne and then Dawn, who raised their hand.
Hi, Anne Higuera again. Greg, supply chain issues are top of mind in our business right now. We do residential construction. So I'm curious about whether you're anticipating that any of the materials that you'll need for the repair will run into any kind of supply chain issues. And I know you may not be able to answer it right now, but it's just top of mind for me, so.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. That is one thing we're looking at as far as the economy right now and the availability of resources, even nationally. That's one of the risks we're tracking in our risk register is the potential for, with COVID and where the economy is right now, the increase of prices of materials and the availability of them. You're absolutely right. This is a risk that we're tracking and we're trying to mitigate through early procurement options or trying to just get a jump on ordering materials or making sure we procure those early. But you're absolutely right. It affects not only vertical construction, but also transportation projects as well. So we are tracking that as a risk.
I just want to underline what Greg just said. That's one of the good parts about GCCM, this contracting method that we're using, is because we have the contractor coming along with us as we design, and they're participating in that process. It allows us to make some of those early, do some of that early work that normally we would have to wait all the way until the end. And so it is going to save us some time. And, supply chain issues can happen anytime, and they're particularly horrifying right now. But that's why we're working toward making some of those orders well in advance of construction.
Very good comment. Very good comment.
Thank
So
you.
we have time for, sorry, Ann. We have time for one more question. I think Dan will go to you and then we have to move on to our next section. So Dan, go ahead.
I was just curious if any of the other folks who've bid have launched any contests to the awarding of this contract. Or are we all clear on that?
We're clear.
No, we're clear. We cleared it, Dan. That was another risk we were tracking on our risk register, but we've cleared that hurdle and we're beyond that point. So
great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great to hear. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Greg. We're going to move to the Low Bridge access update. So this is Maureen and Matt to give us an update there. Maureen, are you ready?
Yeah.
Great. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Maureen Sheehan. I am the Low Bridge Access Program Manager. And just to give a refresher, the Low Bridge also crosses the Duwamish waterway, but at a much lower capacity than the High Bridge. So we are restricting access to the Low Bridge for transit, freight, and emergency vehicles. And for a limited time, we've granted conditional access to a few user groups. Those user groups are West Seattle-based restaurants and retail businesses, as well as maritime businesses, ILWU, government vehicles, and then medical, which means on-call medical providers responding to life-saving medical call outs, as well as folks who are receiving life-saving medical treatment. So for all of those user groups, over the last month and a half, 2 months almost, we've received over 900 online and paper applications. And starting June 1, we were able to grant access to 105 individuals who are receiving life-saving medical treatment, 201 on-call medical providers. So those are providers who are either leaving West Seattle or coming to West Seattle and are on call. And then 116 West Seattle-based restaurant and retail businesses. We're still continuing to receive requests for access. And we're also going to be doing some additional outreach to those restaurants and retail businesses to let them know about the opportunity to request access to the Low Bridge. Couple of reminders, applicants need to, first of all, meet the criteria, as well as apply and provide a license plate. And most importantly, receive approval from USDOT before using the Low Bridge. If folks use the Low Bridge without pre-approval, they will receive a citation. And then for July access, folks need to have those requests into USDOT by June 15th to be considered for that July 1st access. Next slide. So we are already moving on to our next challenge, our big question that we're working through. You'll see two charts in front of you. The first one on the left, that is our current conditions. That purple piece of the pie chart, those are those conditional user groups that I was just talking through. We were able to allow them to have about 900 round trips across the Low Bridge every day. And that's going to be significantly changing in 2022 when the Port of Seattle opens Terminal 5, which is slated to open early 2022. that chart on the right-hand side, you'll notice that purple piece of the pie chart practically disappears. And there is a new piece, which is that Terminal 5 traffic. So SDOT's now in the position where we will be needing to revoke access for those conditional users in order to allow for the additional use of the low bridge for the port's Terminal 5. So that is likely to be happening early 2022. So I want to call everyone's attention to that big change when Terminal 5 opens, that SDOT is going to be needing to revoke access for those conditional users for the low bridge. So how we're going to go about doing that is on the next slide. We're taking a two-pronged approach to this. One is the data, and then second is input from users. So the first thing we're going to be doing is looking at how the low bridge corridor is performing. And when I say corridor, I mean the low bridge as well as the detour routes. It's all part of this bigger ecosystem. And then we're going to be looking at how those user groups that we just talked about, how they are actually using the bridge. It was kind of a big unknown when we went into this. So we're going to be looking at the data of how they're using the bridge over June and July and take that into account. And then also looking at if there are times of day where there's more room on the bridge than other times. Those are kind of the big data pieces we're going to be looking for. And then secondly, we're going to be getting input back from the user group. So we're going to be going out and asking them, likely through a survey, a couple different things like numbers of trips, what's meaningful to you still, as well as time of day, if we need to restrict access to user groups to specific times of day. Maybe we're going to be looking at narrowing the criteria of what those user groups look like, possibly prioritizing user groups. And then the most important part is we want to be able to communicate these changes really clearly to people. So we're going to be asking for input on how we can minimize confusion and communicate these changes. So next slide. So here is our timeline for how we're going to go about doing this. We're going to be coming back to this group as well as the Maritime Town Hall, the Employer Resource Group, and the Low Bridge Access Committee. And again, engaging our user groups as well. And through June and September timeline of looking at the data, doing that outreach piece, and then drafting a policy. And so we'll be able to come back to you all in the fall with that draft policy. And then during October to December of this year, we'll be finalizing that policy as well as preparing everyone for those changes. So come 2022, when the port's Terminal 5 opens, we'll have a new policy in effect and everyone will know what they need to do and the changes that they need to make to their low bridge access. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt Beaulieu, and he's going to talk about how the low bridge use is going right now.
So I hope these graphs are familiar to many of you from previous meetings. As a reminder, the blue and green that we see at the bottom is measured traffic crossing, in this case, westbound to West Seattle via the Lower Spokane Swing Bridge corridor. What we've added on top of that in gray is the expected trips associated with Terminal 5 operations starting early next year. What we wanted to kind of point out here is that in the westbound direction, with those projected trips, we're kind of butting right up against the capacity of the corridor, but we are utilizing more of the capacity of the corridor than we were in some of the previous slides. However, I do want to, as we jump to the next slide, call out that we're going to see a little bit of a difference here in the eastbound direction. What we're seeing in the eastbound direction includes some days that we are, with the added use, actually exceeding what we expect we would have for capacity. So this goes back to the slide that Maureen showed you a few moments ago, where we talked about having to adjust and manage the access for those pass-based users as we move into 2022. So just as a heads up, when we talk about those different user groups, when we talk about West Seattle restaurant and retail businesses, we've given them a slice of that pie. We've made sure that we've kind of divided that up in a manner that we feel is appropriate for those 900 additional trips. And that's 10 round trips per month for those retail businesses. That's not a commute trip. That's I need to get this thing in order for my business to open. In order for my restaurant to open, I need this I need onions because otherwise my pico de gallo is not going to be delicious. This is also the round trips per day, for example, 5 round trips per day for maritime and industrial businesses for that essential thing that I need to make sure that that ship gets to sail, because I need to make sure that I've got that piece of equipment that I can repair. Likewise, we have 225 trips for the ILWU to allow them to be dispatched from their office, which is not on Harbor Island, but is actually just east of. Medical access for both providers and for recipients. That is something that we're still working out the bugs on as we, more accurately, we're refining as we continue to move forward on that. But we heard very strongly from this group that providing access, both for those people who need life-saving medical help and for those who are being called in on an emergency basis to provide that, were something we needed to make sure to provide, as well as the government administration, whether that's the person who's actually managing the bridge that opens and closes, or other association, law enforcement, other public agencies, for example, the folks making sure that the gas leaks get managed.
Okay. So let's pause here for questions for Maureen or Matt on anything low bridge. Any questions that folks have? Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and this might be an SSA or port question here. When T5 reopens in 2022, I know we experience a lot of backups on Terminal 18 right now that can block off that corridor. Is the T5 traffic going to be to the point where Harbor Island workers are going to have trouble getting in to even get to their job sites with backup on traffic with that?
Who might be able to answer that question? Heather, do you want to try? No, you're leaning forward. I was reading your body language.
No, I was gonna suggest actually that's a good question for Bob, and Matt can also add in.
Yeah, this is Bob. Thanks, Heather. Dan, we sure hope not. You know, some of the things that happens when the bridge opens and closes, it can be problematic, because if that traffic backs up in the low-level bridge, then it does start to negatively impact the T18 gate, right? But you know, hopefully, you know, we've got that factored in with the capacities and the turnaround times or the recovery time from when the bridge does open, that you know, we can make that work.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure if people are commuting from West Seattle around East Marginal, back around, and then get to the other side of the bridge and get stopped, I want to make sure the businesses there can get their employees, you know, to show up so they can operate.
Yeah.
Including you guys. So
appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Councilmember Herbold, you made a question, or you put a question in the chat. Do you want to ask that question out loud?
Sure. I'm just wondering about, I appreciate the longer term need for analysis with the new special access users in June and July. But I'm just wondering, based on the current data, particularly for the 5 to 6 a.m. hours, is there any consideration of expanding use during the time where it does still seem like there's capacity, and that added capacity could make it possible for people who are using detour routes to make changes in their commutes, to maybe commute earlier, get off the other roads? just wondering how that's all being thought about.
Yeah, so we actually looked pretty closely at that along with our weekend analysis. We actually analyzed both weekdays and weekends, and I can go into more detail if people are particularly interested. But I wanted to, I guess you could say, if you look at the curve of the way people use it, you see a bump or a spike at the beginning and at the end of that restriction period. And as we look at the diversion on the alternate routes, the primary alternate route being the First Ave South Bridge, we really see that there are a lot of people traveling at that time of morning, such that we would actually be worried about the capacity of this corridor if they weren't doing that diversion.
And I think, Councilmember Herbold, that is both on the weekdays and on the weekends in those those sort of shoulder periods. So I know that there is a lot of concern, and you can see in some of those bars, it looks like there is capacity. If you added the volumes on the alternative routes, which I think Sarah's going to talk about a little bit later and show some graphics there, it would very quickly overwhelm the capacity of the low bridge if everybody who was traveling on those alternative routes went instead onto the low bridge.
Thank you.
Any other questions that folks have? Okay. Megan's got us ready to go to Reconnect West Seattle. This is Sarah Zora and Kevin Futhy from Commute Seattle. So Sarah, why don't you kick us off? We'll move over to Kevin.
All right. Hello, everyone. Again, Sarah Zora, Reconnect West Seattle Mobility Manager. And I will introduce Kevin Futhy as I go along. So Megan, next slide, please. I did want to give a quick update on the West Marginal Way access and safety improvements. So if you've been along West Marginal Way lately, you will notice that we have completed our interim West Side sidewalk that connects from the Herring House. It connects from the signal at the Duwamish River Trail crossing just south of Southwest Idaho and goes right to the Duwamish Longhouse. So that has been complete as of last weekend. We've added that topsoil in. As a reminder that we will be upgrading that to our standard look of concrete sidewalk when we do the permanent signal in 2022. For the interim signal and crosswalk, we're still on track to start construction in late August, September. So as we get into those months, we'll be updating you on exactly the construction schedule for that. In terms of the roadway changes, remember we have a proposal for reusing the outside southbound lane between Marginal Place Southwest to Southwest Alaska Street to reuse the outside travel lane into a protected bike lane and on-street parking. Lately for that, we've been working with within some of the stakeholder feedback we've been receiving to make tweaks to the design we have for that. And we had a really good meeting with our Seattle Freight Advisory Board and Seattle Bicycle Advisory Board to really listen to concerns that both perspectives had and to further address comments on that about the project that they might have had. And so we still are on track for a Q2 decision at this time. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a slide that we're going to continuously bring back to you guys. You saw it, I think last time was the first time. This is our screen line shot for citywide trends for traffic volumes. This actually shows each month being compared against the same month in 2019. So 2019 and the month that was comparing is our baseline. So as you can see, March, April, May of this year, 2021, we're about 30% of the traffic volumes that we were in March, April, May of 2019. So we're really going to keep an eye on this as a citywide trends to really look at how our traffic volumes are changing, especially as Governor Inslee's announcement that we may have a statewide reopening by June 30th. So that's going to be really important for us to try to keep track of the trends and seeing that traffic volumes have been increasing. And I'm going to go to the next slide and zoom in a little bit more on West Seattle specifically. So this is data that we use to really keep track of a couple different things. Well, travel times definitely is what we're keeping track of. So there's, if you're looking at this slide, on the right-hand side, you'll see two different graphics. The first one is really focusing you on the week of May 25th to the 29th of 2020. I just want you to focus on the colors at this time. So you see a lot of green and I guess that's orange, yellow. And that really just shows that the travel times from people going from point A to point B were pretty much in line with some of our February 2020 baseline. So this baseline is the month right before we had both COVID restrictions occurring and the West Seattle Bridge closing. And then if you look at the next part of the graphic below this, you'll see in May 24th to the 28th, so just a few weeks ago of 2021. So we're really introducing you to a trend from one year to the next year. And if you look at the colors for the 2021 area, you see a lot more reds, a lot fewer greens. So you just see that traffic is increasing. The travel times are taking longer, so that's just a reflection on how much more congestion there is out there. And then as we think about June 30th coming and how more people may be able to return to office and things like that, we're really hoping people are consciously making decisions about how they get around or across the Duwamish River in different times of day, and how you can do your part as a community to maybe change the way you get around, try a new mode if you're willing and able, maybe have flexible times for when you start or finish work if you have or if you are going into an office. So just some things to think about. If you're kind of hoping you can use your same commute patterns and really think about the reliability of the network and getting you to work in, let's say, a half hour or so, you may not be able to do that in this phase coming up here with COVID recovery happening and the West Seattle High Bridge still being closed. If you go to the next slide, Megan. Part of the mobility action plan is really focusing on communicating with both community members and employers to really help focus on how we can start to think about in more ways how to reduce the harm on our detour route neighborhoods. How do we get people to shift out of their personal vehicles and using the detour routes across the Duwamish River to get to the other side? And are there different ways that you can do that? We have a consultant coming on board that will be focusing on kind of the community-based side of campaign to kind of think about how people are getting around, what behaviors are you doing to get around, and what could be something that you could think about to get around in a different way. If you think about the employer side of mobility action and how people are moving around, we really are very focused on the COVID recovery opening coming potentially June 30th, restrictions being lifted and return to office. I would like to highlight that the month of June is transit month. So if you are having to go back to office soon, now is a good time to remind yourself how to take transit. I know I'm bringing my girls on the bus sometime this month because they have absolutely missed just taking joy rides, which is a fun thing we used to do on Metro buses. And there's also other options you can have, such as van pool. King County Metro has told us that from the promotions we've been doing with them in partnership, that 8 van pools have started with about 35 participants. We have been working with our large employers to learn more and make sure they have very good understanding about when they need to apply their employer shuttles for low bridge access as well. So we're making sure everyone's tied in together on how to get access to low bridge if you are able to get a van pool together or employer shuttle. And we do have Kevin Futhi here from Commute Seattle. They have just finalized a return to office survey of employers in the region. And we really wanted to invite him here to have you all have a sense of what some employers are thinking about what return to office may look like. So Kevin, if you are ready, I think it might be your turn. Yes.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, I'm ready. And good evening, everybody. I'm just going to go through several slides here that highlight the data that we recently collected at Commute Seattle regarding employers and their plans over the coming months with regard to bringing employees back into the physical work sites. So next slide, please. So just a quick background, this is not a survey of individual commuters. Again, the unit of analysis for us is the workplace itself or the business. And so we were asking business decision makers, whether that's in the HR department or executive leadership, or just individuals within businesses who have knowledge of their internal planning, to answer on behalf of their workplace. This survey was out between April 14th and May 8th. And we did ask a question specifically around how businesses were planning or accommodating those that were affected by the West Seattle High Bridge closure. Most of our responses, our responding businesses had locations in Seattle, but we also did want to get a regional picture. So We had some partners that helped us distribute this survey in Pierce and Snohomish County, and in East King County and South King County. That said, it's still a pretty Seattle heavy sample that we ended up with. About 600 responses from 463 total companies. We had 20 different industries represented, heavily represented by more white collar sectors that are located in downtown, and a fairly good number of small businesses. Around a quarter of respondent had between 1 or 20 employees, but also a fair number of larger corporations as well. But just to give you a sense of who was responding. Next slide, please.
Kevin, before you jump to the next slide, there was a question posted in the chat about how many healthcare institutions responded. Maybe you have that. Maybe you know that off the top of your head.
I wouldn't be able to give you the exact number, but I believe it was on the order of, let's say, a dozen or so, maybe 10 to 12 from the healthcare industry. I could get back to you with the exact number.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to jump to that next slide, please. So one of the questions we asked was just about the potential to continue remote work. And we asked a business basically to put themselves into one of three categories. Either do all the jobs that you have at your business need to be performed on location, or can some of them be performed remotely, or can all of your jobs be performed remotely? And the biggest category there was the middle squishy group. Some jobs can be performed remotely, 71%. Only 9% of our responses, and again, this survey, like I said before, was the sample was skewed towards white collar industries and jobs. Only 9% saying they all must be performed on site, and a full 20% or a fifth of this sample saying that in theory all of their jobs could be performed remotely. So a huge potential in that category, and also in that middle category, to see a long-term shift toward increased telework. Next slide, please. We also wanted to know businesses' insights regarding when they're expecting people to start coming back and at different levels. So we kind of gave people different benchmarks and said, when do you expect to hit that benchmark in terms of your workforce being back on site? 25% back on site, 50% back on site, 75% to 100% back. And so in terms of the partial return to the work site, most businesses are expecting a pretty big ramp up over the next 6 months throughout the rest of this year. 2/3 of work sites are saying they'll get back to 75% by the end of the year. But when it comes to getting all the way back to 100% of their workers back on site, the majority are saying that they don't expect to get there until next year. And interestingly, 1/3 of work sites said that they don't plan that they'll ever get back to 100% because they expect a certain degree of telework for the duration going forward. A PSRC survey, that's the Puget Sound Regional Council, survey of workers themselves here in this region indicated that over 80% do want to work remotely at least some of the time, even after COVID-19. The next slide. We also are very curious to know what employers are thinking about the travel modes that people are going to take as they do start to travel back to the work site. And I do think this highlights a big challenge for our organization and obviously for the city and the region as a whole. 63% of the employers responding to our survey anticipate less transit use than before COVID. And they cited concerns around COVID safety, around general safety as barriers that they perceive. Encouragingly, on the other side, 22% do anticipate more biking. There was a boom of bike sales during the pandemic as people look for a healthy leisure activity, to the point that many bike shops around Seattle were actually out of inventory. It was kind of tough to get bikes there for a little while. And so hopefully many people do turn those leisure activities into their commute activities as they start to return to the office. But again, commensurate with that expectation around less transit use, many employers are anticipating more driving alone compared to before COVID. So a big body of work for us to do to try to not to have that actually play out, but to encourage people that took transit pre-COVID to get back into those old habits. And if they were driving before, to invite them to, explore transit for the first time coming forward. And obviously 81% anticipating more remote work than before COVID. Next slide. Specifically to the West Seattle Bridge closure, we asked people about plans that their business was making to accommodate people who were affected by West Seattle Bridge. Now, many companies they're already addressing this through their general remote work policies right now, but 18% of companies listed some additional steps that they were taking around flexible scheduling, allowing people to either, come in before the peak or after the peak to avoid the most challenging commute hours. And also setting up things like van pools and carpools and encouraging those shared ways of getting into the office. But the biggest ones are still greater flexibility around the time of commute or the choice to be able to work remotely from home. Next slide. No, that's it for me.
Yes.
Back to you.
Oh, some time for questions for Sarah and Kevin. So anyone who has questions on any of that Reconnect West Seattle or the Commute Seattle work, any questions that come up for folks? Paulina noted during the presentation that she used the crosswalk yesterday and is very excited for the crosswalk. So Paulina.
I just wanted to thank Kevin for the stats and the information to be sharing. As we are making future plans, I wanted to make sure that we are considering, for some communities, for example, the Duwamish Valley community members, many of them, they work on the service industry. So there is not a lot of creativity you can do if you don't have a good transportation system. And so that is another issue, we have to deal with Metro. But for how do we incentive for the other communities that have a little more access of faster public transit and other options that are available that we could be pushing through different means, and like how do we make mobility in a better place? And it's not a question, I'm sorry, it's just something that I was reflecting as you were presenting, yes, some of the companies and people with some privilege can stay home working, but that's not the case for so many community members, and I'm referring specifically to the Duwamish Valley.
Yeah.
I think that maybe speaks a little bit, Paulina, to what Sarah said, that there's sort of a shared community responsibility to try to make things work, and that means sort of if everybody tries to go back immediately and reopening to exactly how they used to make those trips, then we're just trying to express that we're going to have a hard time managing all of that traffic, and that it is sort of a shared responsibility to try to do what we can to be flexible, especially for those who don't have that luxury.
Deb, you made a short little comment in the chat, so I wondered, did you have a question, or did you have something you wanted to share?
I'm busy writing it. I'll keep going. Okay. You guys keep going. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands on Jim.
Yeah, I don't either. So Deb,
perhaps we should move.
I'm going to ask you to state your question anyway, so you could just say it, so that if you want to just say it.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with the topics that we have. I want to know who's responsible for the for the Spokane Street on-ramp onto northbound I-5, because it would seem to me logical to have those repairs done before the West Seattle Bridge reopened. So particularly the Spokane Street as you turn onto northbound I-5 on-ramp. Thanks.
Okay, SDOT friends, who's the one that I'm seeing some puzzled faces. Who might be able to jump in on that one?
The reason you're getting puzzled faces is because that is actually right where we divide between City of Seattle jurisdiction and WSDOT jurisdiction. So you could literally be talking about 2 feet further that way and be the states. So it's a shared, it's a boundary jurisdiction between the two. So yes, would be the answer to that question.
It's just the part with the exposed rebar ruts.
I would need to double check on the agreement to see which, but we will look into that.
Good idea. Good idea, Deb. We'll figure that out.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from folks? I don't see any hands. So I think we'll go to our, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So if you have questions, make sure to let us know, but let's go to our last section and then we'll just open it up for comments or questions on any of this. Heather, this is high bridge replacement planning. So this is Heather and Wes. We'll get the slides up. Here we go. So Heather, I'll turn it over to you to start.
Great. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Wes Ducey, who is an engineer here at SDOT, and he is the project manager for our high bridge replacement planning. Now, you have heard us talk about thinking about what's going to happen to the bridge when it reaches the end of its life. And also, you guys may be familiar with the fact that this bridge gave us a little scare. And so we're taking some extra attention on figuring out both a long-term replacement plan as well as a more short-term kind of emergency situation replacement. So Wes, if you're here, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I am. Can you all hear me? Great. Thanks for the introduction, and great to be here this evening, Community Task Force. So with that, we'll get right into the why. Heather touched on it a little bit, but we're starting out here with a timeline as a graphic here, just laying out the original construction of the bridge, keeping very clear that the work that's ongoing for the repair is still happening. We're aiming for that 2022 milestone for reopening, and yet we're looking at a horizon of 2060, getting that the rest of that remaining service life out of the bridge after we repair it. It's a 40-year look ahead. And so with that, we have this timescale piece here, and how do we be prepared in between those 40 years? So what can we do now to think about 2060, and what can we do now to be prepared for something if something happens between, and so we're a little bit further ahead. But back to the why of this work, it really follows the decision to repair made in November by Mayor Durkin, but to also plan for that eventual replacement. And a really key why right now, we've touched on it in these other presentations, but I'm a West Seattle resident as well and know very well that we are gaining some understanding, somewhat painfully, of how traffic moves about the Duwamish Valley and how impactful having the bridge closed is to this valley. So that's a little bit of the time scale and the why. And as Heather mentioned, the two objectives, if we go to the next slide, for this planning work, is to really be proactive in this moment, carry forward that understanding that we're gaining about mobility in the area, and developing both a contingency replacement, continuing that development of what you may remember from the CBA was an accelerated superstructure replacement. So we have that at a better place. It was the second scoring option in the repair versus replace decision of the CBA. And the key element of that was, in making that decision, was how can we be sure to restore mobility in the shortest amount of time? So by doing a little more work now in that contingency, we can be better prepared to move more quickly, to pursue funding. Those pieces at the end, at the bottom of this slide, leverage this existing attention we have to the corridor to really be better prepared from a budget and time perspective. And then that second piece that'll be a little bit more of our typical planning study is to look at the eventual replacement back on that 2060 horizon, and to understand where could that go. That's the most kind of valuable question to ask right now and to get into is location. Where could that replacement go in this constrained corridor? Trying to think if there's anything else to note on this slide. And I think I touched on all of the savings of time and money, but just to kind of rehash, not only are we able to save some time and money on that contingency replacement doing that work right now, but by looking at locations, we can really be a little bit more honed in on where in the corridor we'll be looking for an eventual replacement. And that'll prepare us to move more quickly through the more robust planning and permitting process for when we're ready for that time. But it also is good documentation now, so we can move a little bit more efficiently at that time. So a little bit more of the whys of these two elements of work. And to get into a little more of the planning scope itself, we can go to the next slide here. This image on this slide is just a general overview of the project area that we're looking at. The blue square there stretching from our Duwamish or our Del Ridge off ramp to the Chelan 5-way intersection on the west side, and then spanning to the east to our connection to 99. And so we have to consider this entire project area as we do our initial planning for comparing locations. So the deliverables here that we have are looking at locations and screening these different alternatives for locations. And we're going to be looking to the north of the existing bridge, the south of the existing bridge, what we could do in the existing alignment of our current closed bridge, and what we could do to locate a tunnel in this Duwamish crossing area. A couple key criteria that we have to keep in mind for all of those, though, and a couple key ways that it's moving a little bit beyond the CBA's work, is we have to kind of really look at how we would tie all of these alternatives into our existing connections. You know, I talked a little bit about mobility being really essential in this area, but we have to also make sure we can maintain access that the existing bridge provided. So when we look at these different locations, and particularly when we look at the tunnel, it's going to be a little different because we're going to be really making sure that we can make all of our connections and maintain access in this area. And then one other kind of element as we talk about location comparisons that we're very aware of in our current moment is how can we look at something offline that we could build alongside our current structure and save some construction time versus building something online, maybe doing it in phases, and how do we compare the mobility we can have during construction for those options. So it's just a really key comparison that'll help us screen and understand the best location for replacing the structure in the far future. And then the other element of this that goes along with it is to do a needs and feasibility assessment for multimodal integration. So it's really kind of a check as we see this increase, particularly of people walking and biking in the area. What is our volume and capacity with our existing network, and doing a feasibility check of when we arrive at a preferred location and kind of limits of where we would make a replacement, is it feasible to add facilities for folks walking, biking, or using transit that we don't already provide? So just doing that feasibility check alongside this location planning and really thinking about those very technical elements of this early planning work. Now, I've talked about locations and I've talked about multimodal integration, but a really key element of this is going to be to make sure we continue coordinating with our agency partners and do all that we can to minimize impacts to freight, maritime, and rail in this constrained corridor. We're starting with location. It's a constrained corridor, and there are other folks that have existing and planned projects here. So we really have to make sure that we can continue our coordination with them and minimize impacts in that way. I think I touched on all of this slide. Pardon me for reviewing my notes.
Hey, Wes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to jump on Angie's role here, but it looks like Jen Temple also has a question about proactive cross-agency coordination. So do you want to talk just for a minute about the interaction and the gajillion meetings with Sound Transit we're having?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So could I just get a repeat of the full question before I jump in?
Yeah, we'll read it for it. Actually, Jen, do you want to ask it yourself?
Put it up. So, under your proactive approach, does it include cross-agency coordination discussion to ensure that Sound Transit does not delay light rail to West Seattle as part of the realignment process? Last year, in the course of these 20 meetings, there was a big chunk of what we talked about as we were making the recommendation, was this redundancy was going to be something that we were counting on, not 100%. Of course, nothing's 100%, but that was a serious consideration. That hey, we're going to have light rail, so we're going to have some redundancy when when it does eventually need to be replaced. And now suddenly, like 6 weeks ago or whenever it was, or suddenly may not even happen. That's very alarming, and I haven't seen anything I just haven't seen enough about what that means here. So thank you.
And I can just speak to our continued coordination, and that we're certainly working with our scope, looking at replacement options, and as I said, trying to minimize impacts to all existing and planned projects here. But we really can't speak outside of that for our coordination. We've got a lot of small engineering work group style meetings because it's a very technical study, but there's coordination of very many different levels that we continue to engage in with Sound Transit.
So if I can just help a little bit on this one too, Jen, I think your question is really about the realignment process that Sound Transit is going through now as they look at both revenues impacted from COVID and then cost as they are looking at the delivery of the whole ST3 program. And that is a place where the city is engaged with Sound Transit, and really there's a lot of discussion with the Sound Transit board about those realignment decisions. And Mayor Durkan has been very strongly in favor of only making the decisions that need to be made now and really leaving the flexibility open for how the ST3 program gets delivered. What Wes is talking about, and again, just to reiterate this point, we're expecting this to be long in the future. And so I think that regardless of when the ST3 investments are built, it's still a safe assumption that when we need to replace the West Seattle Bridge eventually, the ST3 investments will likely be completed, no matter what the realignment decisions are, given the timelines that we're talking about for needing to replace it after this repair is complete, and the realignment scenarios that have been discussed through the Sound Transit Board.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Any other chat questions that I missed relative to these slides? I'm just about through and we can get to the full Q&A. Okay.
Yeah, there weren't any on this slide, so.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so we are moving quickly to get this understanding in this area because we do want to remain efficient. We want to take the attention and the energy of making sure that we can maintain and restore mobility and do the work we can do now for both long-term planning and that contingency replacement work. And with that rapid schedule, we plan to come back to you at these key milestones to be able to do more of an introduction of what these concepts are looking like, show some of our feasibility findings, and provide that draft study by the Q3 2021 with the final study by the end of this year. And I just want to reiterate at this moment just that we have lots of ways that we study for replacement of structures. As Heather mentioned at the very beginning, we had a scare with this one, and we had to really consider doing some planning before we were anticipating. But this is the first step. This is a little bit different step of really thinking about location within a constrained corridor. And we would revisit this as we get closer to the remaining service life after our successful repair. So we're doing some feasibility, some technical work, and really looking forward to continuing to inform the community of what we find and coming back to the CTF to do that. So I just want to say thanks for letting me introduce this work, and we can transition it to some Q&A.
Any questions for Wes? I think we'll be hearing more about this over time, but certainly we have time now. We are ahead of schedule here, so there's time. If you have some questions that are coming up for you, we have time to talk about them. Anne, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Ann.
Ann Higuera, sorry, I keep asking so many questions. So when we made the decision, when we made the recommendation to the mayor about the repair of the bridge and considered replacements, there was talk that it would be really difficult to fund a new bridge while the other bridge was still functioning. So I guess I'm wondering, is this an exercise so that you're ready when it needs to happen, or do you think that it's feasible to build a new bridge while the other one is still functional?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we'll be looking into, and this is kind of that initial step of planning, we'll be looking into the question of constructability and doing a lot of that technical work to understand how you would consider building something while keeping existing traffic going. But that we're talking about 2060, and it is the eventual replacement. So that's when it becomes more serious that we need to replace it, and that will set us up well to pursue funding for that. It's a different context, I guess, if I can provide that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? While y'all might be thinking about it, I will let you know. I don't know if Kevin, I think is still here, but he put in the chat that there were 27 responses from the health and hospital industries to the survey. That was a question from earlier. So, any other?
Way to go, Kevin.
Yeah.
Way to have the information right there.
Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns? Okay. Oh yeah, here we go. I got another hand up. Marcy.
Sorry. Yes, there's my unmute button. So going back to the Reconnect West Seattle, is Sarah still with us?
Yes.
Okay. So Sarah, I'm wondering if you've given any thoughts to, you know, as we're trying to get people to make modal shifts, to having, I don't know, for lack of a better term, I'll call them ambassadors, people who have lived experience making a shift. And maybe it's, I do this one day a week, or I do this once every 2 weeks. That's different than my usual travel method. Just so that it's people with lived experience talking to other people, rather than, you know, I mean, the staff is always great. We're great at, you know, talking to people, but it's like, well, if you haven't lived my experience, then you don't know. So just wondering if you've thought about using that kind of ambassador sort of program.
Yeah, I think, Marcy, thanks for that comment. I do think that when we have our upcoming consultant come on board, they will be doing a lot of kind of mini campaigns and using personas to really help get people to think about different ways to get around. So it's almost the same kind of thing as ambassadors, but I'll definitely take that back to our mobility action team and see how we can incorporate some of those ideas too. That's really thoughtful. Thank you for sharing.
If I could just follow up.
Yes.
I was part of a campaign in the early 90s in Boulder, Colorado, granted smaller area, but to get people to try to get people to out of their single occupant vehicles. And it really did help when there were people from a particular industry or from a particular occupation who were the real live people who could say, okay, this is how I figured out how to pick up my kid and do X and get home or whatever I have to do. You know, it really did help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy. Councilmember Herbold, you had a question about Washington State Ferries.
Yeah, just wondering, given that Washington State Ferries just announced third ferry on the Triangle Route first time since COVID closures. Just wondering what we can expect for impacts on traffic.
Yep. You know, Councilmember Herbold, we were a little thankful because they were supposed to start that third ferry back in May, beginning of May. So it has been delayed for a month and had some chance to not have that added ferry traffic. We do have some speed traffic calming coming in. If you are thinking about going southbound route to get to across the Duwamish, like on Marine View Drive and Southwest 106th Street, we will be putting some traffic calming there to really help slow down traffic, because I know there's people trying to maneuver in all different ways as they're coming to and leaving the Fauntleroy Ferry. We've added some additional 4 either repaired or replaced or new radar feedback signs along Fauntleroy to really make sure that we're very focused on people's speeds and people are understanding the speed limit that they should be referring to. And we did just work with or talk with the West Seattle Transportation Coalition, and we have been hearing a little bit more about from community about traffic congestion and complaints and speeding from Fauntleroy Ferry. So we are doing additional data collection on some of the corridors, non-arterial routes that may get some additional traffic calming as well. So we are trying to make sure that people are aware that we have different ways to get around, where the detour routes are, and to try to manage the traffic and speeds on those detour routes. But we do acknowledge that the third ferry and additional vehicles will cause additional challenges.
Thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of concern about driver behavior, adding to road rage, a lot of lane cutting and that sort of thing. So working on that is really appreciated. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. You'll be hearing more about it too with this upcoming kind of behavior change campaign, seeing how we can get people to change their ways if willing and able.
We're kind of approaching the end here. We have time for more questions or comments, but I wanted to remind folks about the reflection form. We can drop the link for that into the chat so that if you're willing to complete the reflection form before you pop off, that would be great. And Lori, maybe you can drop that into the chat for folks. Any other questions that have ideas? There's some great suggestions. Happy to hear any of them. Okay, Megan tells me no, and she puts the slides up. That's what happens. So, okay, so just wrapping up, we're going to be done a little early so y'all can get to your evening activities. Our next meeting is Wednesday, where it's one of our middle of the day meetings. So that'll be Wednesday, July 14th at noon. We're going to talk about the 60% design update, as well as more updates on traffic, Reconnect West Seattle, mobility action plan, and we'll work on updating you on everything that's new and exciting. Paulina had to drop off, so we don't have Greg or Paulina to do a send-off for us. So I was joking earlier, this feels like the kids are home without the parents. So here we are, and I just wanted to thank everyone for their time and all the great conversation. And we are looking forward to seeing you all again in a month. Heather, Sam, anything you want to say as kind of a send-off for folks?
Thanks for joining us. And I really do think that the next month we'll have I know there was a lot of questions about where we are on the capital side of things. I think next month we'll be able to have a deeper dive there as we continue to make progress. We also just recognize again that everybody's under a ton of stress as in trying to move back and forth across the Duwamish. And please know that everybody at SDOT on this is working tirelessly to restore this connection and mitigate the problems that folks are facing. So we hear you, and we're working our hardest to move things forward as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, Sam, thanks. And I also, just on the more human side, I know how much time all of you have spent with us, especially in those first crazy months where we were meeting every other week and trying to get everybody up to speed while we're trying to get ourselves up to speed with what had happened. So we really appreciate you all keeping faith with us and hanging around. And we are just about to, for January or July, August, September, October, November, there's going to be a lot going on. And I think you're going to start to feel what you've been missing, which is like, you know, some momentum toward the actual construction that we need to do. So thank you all for hanging with us, and we will see you in a month.
All right, thanks everyone. Good night.